The chill of late autumn clung to Sainte-Marie, a small village nestled in the heart of occupied France. Thomas Harper, codenamed Sparrow, shivered, though not from the cold. His breath plumed in the pre-dawn air as he surveyed the cobblestone square, the faint glow of a single street lamp casting long, distorted shadows. Every creak of the old buildings, every distant dog bark felt amplified in the oppressive silence of occupation. His mission was clear: establish contact with the local resistance cell and gather intelligence on German troop movements. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. He adjusted the worn tweed cap on his head, a deliberate attempt to blend in with the local populace, though his British tailoring felt alien even under the dim light. 2 weeks he'd been here, gathering scraps of information, piecing together the fragmented puzzle of the German presence. The tension in Sainte-Marie was palpable, a constant hum beneath the surface of forced normalcy. German patrols were frequent, their boots echoing ominously on the ancient stones, their presence a suffocating blanket over the once vibrant community. Tonight, however, was different. A tip-off, vague and delivered through a nervous whisper from a baker's apprentice, spoke of an unexpected German convoy passing through the village square just before dawn. This was his chance to observe, to confirm troop numbers and equipment. Thomas pressed himself against the damp stone wall of the boulangerie, the scent of stale bread and fear in the air. His hand instinctively went to the concealed .38 revolver in his coat pocket, a cold comfort. Suddenly, the rumble of heavy engines shattered the quiet. Headlights pierced the gloom, illuminating the square in a harsh, blinding glare. A column of German trucks, followed by an armored car, began to roll slowly through the village. Thomas squinted, trying to make out details, when a sharp, guttural shout erupted from behind him. A German patrol, on foot, had emerged from the alleyway. They'd seen him. Panic, cold and swift, seized him. He had seconds, no time to explain, no time to fight. His eyes darted desperately, searching for cover. That's when he saw her. A young woman, wrapped in a simple shawl, just emerging from a side street, perhaps on her way to the market or to church. Without thinking, acting purely on instinct, Thomas lunged forward. He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her close, and in one swift, desperate motion, pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was rough, unexpected, meant only as a disguise. He held her tight, his back to the approaching soldiers, hoping the embrace would be convincing enough to pass for a lover's tryst in the shadows. He could feel her surprise, her rigidness, but she didn't scream. Not yet. The German patrol passed, their boots clanking on the cobblestones, their voices fading into the pre-dawn mist. Thomas slowly released the young woman, stepping back, his heart hammering against his ribs. The air crackled with an awkward silence, thick with the unspoken tension of their bizarre encounter. Her eyes, a striking shade of blue, narrowed in a mixture of confusion and outrage. A flush spread across her cheeks, visible even in the dim light. "What do you think you're doing?" she whispered, her voice a low, furious hiss, distinctly French, but with an underlying strength Thomas hadn't expected. She clutched the shawl tighter around her, her gaze darting to the retreating Germans before fixing back on him. Thomas swallowed, trying to regain his composure. I apologize. It was necessary. They were looking for someone." He gestured vaguely in the direction the soldiers had gone. He couldn't reveal his true identity or his purpose. "You helped me, unknowingly. Thank you." He expected a slap, a shout, anything. Instead, her expression softened, a flicker of understanding replacing the anger. "Looking for someone," she repeated, her voice now laced with a hint of concern. Are you with the resistance?" Her gaze was surprisingly direct, piercing. Thomas hesitated. He couldn't confirm, couldn't deny. A moment too long of silence would be damning. "I'm just a man trying to survive," he replied, a carefully crafted lie that felt disturbingly close to the truth. The occupation makes life difficult for everyone. He tried to project a weary resignation, a common sentiment among the villagers. He watched her closely, searching for any sign of suspicion. She studied him, her eyes tracing his face, as if trying to decipher his true intentions. The silence stretched, fraught with unspoken questions. "My name is Isabelle," she said finally, her voice softer, almost hesitant. "Isabelle Dubois." "Thomas," he replied, offering his false name. He felt a strange pull, a reluctant curiosity about this woman who had, by sheer chance, become entangled in his perilous world. The encounter, born out of desperate necessity, had taken an unforeseen turn. He had needed a disguise. He had found a connection, however fleeting. The following days were a delicate dance of observation and calculated risk for Thomas. He continued his intelligence gathering, meticulously documenting German movements and personnel. The information about the convoy proved accurate, adding crucial details to his reports, yet his mind often drifted back to Isabelle. He found himself scanning the village square, the market, the church, hoping to catch another glimpse of her. He told himself it was purely for tactical reasons, to ensure she hadn't recognized him, that she wouldn't pose a risk. But a deeper, unacknowledged curiosity gnawed at him. One afternoon, while discreetly sketching a map of German checkpoints near the local Kommandantur, he saw her again. Isabelle was walking with an older man, a tall, imposing figure in a crisp Wehrmacht uniform adorned with numerous medals. A chill ran down Thomas's spine. His training screamed danger. He ducked behind a parked delivery truck, pulling his cap low, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm. He watched them. The man's posture was rigid, authoritative. Isabelle seemed less at ease beside him, her shoulders slightly hunched, her gaze downcast. As they approached the Kommandantur, the German soldier stopped at the entrance, exchanged a brief, curt word with a guard, and then held the door open for Isabelle, a gesture that spoke volumes of familiarity and authority. Thomas felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He knew the Kommandantur was the local German headquarters, a fortress of power and control. He knew the man in uniform was clearly an officer of significant rank, but for Isabelle to be so intimately connected to him, it defied logic. He had to know. He needed to confirm. Later that evening, in the dimly lit backroom of a sympathetic baker, his contact, an elderly woman named Madame Dubois, no relation, as she quickly confirmed, passed him a small, folded piece of paper. "Word from the resistance," she whispered, her eyes darting nervously towards the street. "They say the new commandant arrived last week, General Klaus Richter, a ruthless man." Thomas nodded, his mind racing. "And his family," he pressed, trying to sound casual. Madame Dubois frowned. "Just his daughter, they say. A quiet girl. Stays mostly to herself. Isabelle, I believe her name is." The world tilted for Thomas. Isabelle. The same Isabelle. The woman he had impulsively kissed to escape capture was the daughter of the very man he was supposed to be spying on, the local head of the German occupation. The irony was brutal, the implications terrifying. His mission just became infinitely more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. The revelation of Isabelle's true identity cast a long, dark shadow over Thomas's mission. Every sighting of her in the village now felt like a punch to the gut. His professional duty clashed violently with the lingering memory of their brief, desperate contact. He needed to avoid her, yet he found himself inexplicably drawn to her, a moth to a dangerous flame. One rainy afternoon, Thomas was observing troop movements near the main bridge when he saw Isabelle again. She was alone, walking slowly, her head bowed against the drizzle, a basket clutched in her hand. She looked fragile, vulnerable. A sudden, irrational impulse seized him. He couldn't simply let her pass. He had to know more, even if it jeopardized everything. He quickened his pace, falling into step beside her. "Isabelle," he said softly, his voice low enough to be lost in the patter of the rain. She startled, her head snapping up. Her blue eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in recognition. "You," she breathed, a mix of apprehension and something else Thomas couldn't quite decipher. "What do you want?" I wanted to apologize again," he began, the lie tasting bitter on his tongue. "For that morning. It was an act of desperation, nothing more. I didn't mean to distress you." He watched her closely, searching for any telltale sign of suspicion, or worse, a trap. Isabelle stopped, turning to face him fully, rain beading on her eyelashes. "Distress me?" She scoffed softly, a hint of a wry smile playing on her lips. "You nearly gave me a heart attack, but you did help me. The soldiers were about to question me about my late-night errand. They're always suspicious." Her gaze was surprisingly direct, searching. "You said you were just a man trying to survive. Is that truly all you are?" Thomas hesitated. The opportunity to probe, to glean information, was too tempting. "Survival takes many forms in these times," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Some adapt, some resist, some simply try to disappear." He paused, then took a chance. "You seem different than your father." Her expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "My father is a German officer," she stated, her voice flat. "I am his daughter. That is all." The curtness of her tone was a clear barrier. Yet, beneath it, Thomas sensed a deep-seated weariness, a resignation that spoke volumes. The rain continued to fall, blurring the edges of their dangerous dance. He knew he was playing with fire, but he couldn't stop himself. If you're finding this story gripping, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Your support helps us bring more captivating stories to life. Their conversation by the bridge was cut short by the distant sound of a German patrol. Isabelle quickly bade him farewell, her voice strained, and hurried away. Thomas knew he had pushed his luck, yet the brief exchange had offered a glimpse into her guarded world, confirming his suspicion that her relationship with her father was more complex than it appeared. Over the next few days, Thomas observed Isabelle more closely, but always from a distance. He noted her solitary walks, her quiet demeanor, how she seemed to shy away from German soldiers, despite being the commandant's daughter. He saw her interact with some of the local villagers, the baker, an old woman who sold flowers, and noticed the wary politeness in their exchanges, a forced civility that masked deeper resentments. One evening, while performing a nocturnal reconnaissance near the Kommandantur, Thomas noticed a light burning late in one of the upper windows. He recognized it as Isabelle's room. He saw her silhouette, sitting by the window, often just staring out into the dark, desolate street. She looked lonely, isolated, a prisoner in her own gilded cage. Driven by an impulse he couldn't explain, Thomas decided to risk a direct approach, but one carefully orchestrated. He knew Isabelle visited the local market every Thursday morning. He positioned himself at a quiet stall selling old books, feigning interest in a worn copy of Dumas. As Isabelle passed, he cleared his throat subtly. She paused, her eyes meeting his. This time, there was less surprise, more a hesitant curiosity. "Good morning, Thomas," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Isabelle, good morning." He picked up a book, feigning a cough. "I saw you the other day, by the bridge." She nodded, her gaze drifting to the German soldiers patrolling nearby. "Yes, it was an unusual conversation." "Perhaps we could have another," Thomas suggested, his voice low. "Away from prying eyes." He gestured subtly to the market's edge, towards a less frequented path leading to the churchyard. Isabelle hesitated, her internal conflict clear on her face. Her eyes scanned the market, perhaps for her father's guards, or for anyone who might be watching. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the occupation, she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "In an hour," she murmured, "by the old fountain." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the bustling market crowd. Thomas felt a thrill of danger and anticipation. He was stepping deeper into a perilous game, but he couldn't resist the allure of understanding the woman behind the enemy's daughter facade. The old fountain in St. Marie's churchyard was a quiet, secluded spot, its gentle, trickling water a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions Thomas felt. Isabelle arrived promptly, her expression a mixture of apprehension and a guarded determination. The air was cool, a faint breeze rustling the leaves of the ancient oak trees. "Why did you want to meet?" Isabelle asked, her voice hushed, her eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. Thomas chose his words carefully. "I wanted to understand. You are the Commandant's daughter, yet you speak with a certain detachment about the occupation, and you seemed wary of the soldiers." Isabelle sighed, a weary sound. "My father is a man of duty, a soldier. This is his war, not mine." She paused, her gaze fixed on the water in the fountain. "He believes in order, in discipline. He believes he is bringing that to France. I see the hunger in the eyes of the villagers, the fear, the resentment." Her voice was barely audible. "My mother was French. She died when I was young. She taught me about this land, about its people. I carry a part of that even now." Thomas felt a surge of unexpected empathy. "You're caught between two worlds," he stated, not as a question, but as an observation. She looked at him then, her blue eyes filled with a raw, unspoken pain. "More than you know. My father expects loyalty. The villagers, they expect complicity, or worse. I am neither German nor fully French, not to them." "What about the resistance?" Thomas ventured, watching her reaction closely. Her head snapped up, her eyes widening slightly. "I know nothing of them," she stated, perhaps too quickly. "It is dangerous to speak of such things." Her gaze hardened, a shield falling into place. "Why are you truly here, Thomas? You are not from Sainte Marie, I know that, and you are too observant for a simple villager." Thomas knew he was cornered. He couldn't reveal his true identity, but he needed her trust, or at least her understanding. He decided to offer a partial truth, a carefully constructed narrative. "I am a journalist. Before the war, I was documenting the occupation, trying to get the truth out. It was a lie, but one close enough to his true purpose that it felt plausible. I got caught behind enemy lines. Now I just try to survive, and perhaps to help those who suffer under this regime." He looked directly into her eyes, pleading with his gaze for her to believe him. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the delicate lines of worry on her face. Isabelle studied Thomas, her expression unreadable. The journalist's story was thin, yet plausible enough in the chaotic landscape of wartime. More importantly, she sensed an earnestness in his eyes that transcended the simple words. The weight of her own isolation, her silent struggle, seemed to draw her to this enigmatic stranger. "A journalist," she repeated slowly, as if testing the word on her tongue. "A dangerous profession these days." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "Even more dangerous than being the daughter of a German general." Thomas returned her smile, a genuine one this time. "Perhaps we share a certain proximity to danger, then." He saw a flicker of something new in her eyes, a shared understanding, a spark of connection in their mutually precarious existences. Over the following weeks, their clandestine meetings became more frequent, always in secluded spots: the churchyard, a deserted stretch of the riverbank, the quiet corners of the market. Thomas learned more about Isabelle, her quiet defiance, her empathy for the villagers, her growing disillusionment with her father's duty. She spoke of the heavy-handed German policies, the increasing scarcity of food, the roundups of young men for forced labor. She was observant, insightful, and possessed a quiet courage Thomas deeply admired. He, in turn, shared carefully selected anecdotes from his journalistic endeavors, stories of resilience and resistance he had witnessed, weaving in truths about the broader war without revealing his true allegiance. He found himself drawn to her intelligence, her quiet strength, and the surprising depth of her compassion. He was still a spy, and every conversation was a risk, every word a potential trap. Yet with Isabelle, the lines began to blur. His professional detachment was eroding, replaced by a feeling he hadn't anticipated, genuine affection. One afternoon, a German patrol abruptly marched through the churchyard where they were talking. Thomas instinctively pulled Isabelle behind a large gravestone, his hand finding hers. Their fingers intertwined, a silent electric connection. He felt her tremble, not from fear of the soldiers, but from the sudden intimacy of their touch. The moment stretched, fraught with unspoken emotions, as the soldiers passed by, their stern faces oblivious to the hidden drama unfolding just yards away. When they were gone, Isabelle pulled her hand away, her cheeks flushed, her eyes wide with a mixture of embarrassment and a nascent desire. The truth of his mission, of who he really was, weighed heavily on Thomas. He knew he was falling for the enemy's daughter, and it was a dangerous, exhilarating precipice. If you're captivated by this unfolding romance and danger, hit that subscribe button right now. Don't miss the dramatic conclusion of this story. The shared moment behind the gravestone solidified something unspoken between Thomas and Isabelle. Their meetings grew less about probing for information and more about genuine connection. He found himself confiding in her, subtly, indirectly, about the burdens of his work, the constant fear, the moral compromises. She, in turn, shared her deepest anxieties about her father, about the war, about the uncertain future of France. Thomas learned that General Richter, while outwardly strict and disciplined, genuinely believed in his cause, viewing his role as bringing order to a chaotic world. Isabelle often argued with him, subtly challenging his views on the French people, expressing her distress at the daily realities of the occupation. Her father, while dismissing her concerns as youthful idealism, seemed to tolerate her quiet defiance, perhaps out of a paternal affection that war couldn't entirely extinguish. This complex dynamic made Isabelle an invaluable, if unwitting, source of information for Thomas. She often relayed details of her father's frustrations with local troublemakers, or his plans for increased security measures, unaware she was providing vital intelligence. One cold evening, as they walked by the frozen river, Thomas saw a new poster plastered on the village wall, a list of names, local men accused of resistance activities, to be executed by firing squad. A cold dread gripped him. He knew some of those names. He needed to warn the local resistance cell, but the danger of being seen with Isabelle, now a constant companion, was immense. He turned to her, his face grim. "Isabelle, I have to go." His voice was strained. "There's something I need to do, something urgent." Her brow furrowed with concern. "What is it? You look distressed." He hesitated. The deception was a heavy cloak, suffocating him. He wanted to tell her, to shed the weight of his lies. But revealing his true identity as a British spy would not only endanger his mission, but her life as well. The thought of her facing her father, knowing she had aided an enemy agent, was unbearable. It's about the posters," he finally admitted, his voice low. "Those men, they don't deserve this. I need to try and help them." Isabelle's eyes widened. Help them. But how? My father, he signed those orders. Her voice was a horrified whisper. You can't interfere. It's too dangerous. She grasped his arm, her fingers digging into his coat. Please, Thomas, don't. Her voice was laced with genuine fear, not for her father's security, but for his. He looked into her pleading eyes, the burgeoning love for her clashing violently with his unwavering duty. The war had forged him into a weapon, but she was slowly, irrevocably humanizing him again. Thomas knew he had to act. The resistance contact, Monsieur Pelletier, a quiet shoemaker, had given him a rendezvous point for emergencies. But escaping Isabelle's desperate grip felt like tearing a part of himself away. I have to, Isabelle, he said, his voice firm despite the tremor in his hands. These are innocent lives. He gently disengaged her hand from his arm. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. A lie. He wasn't sure of anything anymore, except that he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He moved quickly, melting into the shadows of the village, leaving a distraught Isabelle behind. He found Pelletier in a cramped, musty cellar, the air thick with the smell of leather and fear. He relayed the information about the executions. Pelletier's face went grim. We'll try to get word out to their families, he said, his voice hoarse. But moving them now, it's almost impossible. As they discussed the slim chances of a rescue, a sudden commotion erupted upstairs. Shouts, the heavy thud of boots. Germans! Pelletier hissed. They found us! Thomas's heart leaped into his throat. He had been followed. Had Isabelle been compromised? Or was it just a random patrol? There was no time to think. Pelletier pointed to a loose stone in the wall. Hidden passage! Go! Thomas squeezed through the narrow opening just as the cellar door burst open. He heard shouts, Pelletier's defiant roar, and then a sickening thud. He crawled through the damp earth, his mind racing. He was exposed, his cover was blown. He had to get out of Sainte-Marie, but his thoughts were consumed not by his mission, but by Isabelle. He had left her vulnerable. He emerged from the passage into a deserted alleyway behind the Kommandantur. The main gates were open, a flurry of activity around the entrance, soldiers running, more trucks arriving, and then he saw her, Isabelle, standing near the Kommandantur's entrance, talking animatedly with a German officer, not her father, but a younger, severe-looking man. She looked distraught, her hands clasped together. Was she betraying him? Had she reported him? The thought was a searing pain in his chest. He needed to confirm. He needed to know. He risked a closer approach, hiding behind a horse cart. He overheard snippets of their conversation. Isabelle was pleading, her voice high-pitched with desperation. Please, Captain, you must understand. He was just trying to help. He's not a spy. The captain was shaking his head, his face stern. Fräulein Dubois, your father's orders are clear. Any associate of a known conspirator will be interrogated. Thomas froze. She was defending him. She knew. She had seen him talking to Pelletier, and she was still trying to protect him, even at risk to herself. The love he felt for her, previously a forbidden whisper, roared into a full-blown conviction. He had to save her, even if it meant sacrificing his mission, his life. The choice was no longer impossible, it was clear. Thomas knew he couldn't leave Isabelle to face the consequences of his actions. His mission, his duty, suddenly seemed secondary to the safety of this woman he had unexpectedly come to love. He had to create a diversion, draw attention away from her. He pulled his revolver, its cold weight familiar in his hand. He fired a shot into the air, aiming away from any people, sending a loud crack echoing through the quiet evening. The German soldiers immediately turned their attention towards the sound, shouting, "Alarm! Over there!" In the chaos, Thomas saw Isabelle's head snap towards him, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and understanding. He gave her a quick, almost imperceptible nod, a silent message. "I'm doing this for you." Then he turned and ran, drawing the fire of the German guards, leading them away from the Kommandantur, away from Isabelle. He heard their shouts, the rapid succession of gunfire as bullets whizzed past him, chipping stone from the buildings. He sprinted through the narrow streets, ducking into alleyways, using his knowledge of Sainte Marie's labyrinthine passages to his advantage. He had one goal: to escape, to draw the Germans as far away from Isabelle as possible, and then, somehow, to survive and return for her. The thought of leaving her behind, vulnerable to her father's wrath or German interrogation, was unbearable. He reached the outskirts of the village, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter. He ran through fields, his lungs burning, the chill night air biting at his exposed skin. He knew he was severely compromised, his mission likely failed, but a new mission had taken root in his heart. Isabelle. Days later, battered and exhausted, Thomas made contact with a regional resistance network far from Sainte Marie. He reported on his failed mission, the compromised cell, and the perilous situation of Isabelle Dubois. The resistance leadership, understanding the complexities of the situation and the critical intelligence Isabelle could potentially provide, despite her lineage, agreed to a long-term plan to monitor her safety and, if possible, facilitate her eventual extraction. Thomas knew the war was far from over. He was a spy, a soldier, and his duty would call him to other missions, other dangers. But the image of Isabelle, brave and defiant, pleading with the German captain, was seared into his mind. He didn't know when or how, but he would return for her. Their story, born of a desperate kiss and forged in the crucible of war, was far from over. It was a story of unexpected love, sacrifice, and the unwavering hope for a future beyond the shadows of conflict. The village girl and the spy, bound by a secret kiss and a love that defied the lines of war, would find their way back to each other somehow. Thank you for watching this thrilling story. If you were moved by Thomas and Isabelle's journey, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your friends. Your support helps us create more compelling narratives, and remember to turn on notifications so you're the first to know when our next story drops.